It's Bonnie with So Inspired by Bonnie with another Tuesday's tip. I'm going to refresh my page on the computer here and make sure that I can see you guys and get started. Today we're going to talk about, and of course my computer is not wanting to refresh, but today we're going to talk about mishaps, and they happen, and we're going to talk about test sews and how to use those up creatively. Hopefully I'm going to see you. So if you're out there, please, let me know you're there so that I can get started here. Oh, hi Carol. Okay, I'm starting to see some here on my phone, but I'm not seeing them yet on my computer. So I want to make sure that I get it set up on my computer where I can see it. If you can tell, I'm not in my usual spot. I'm here in Colorado. As many of you know, I live in Texas, but I'm here in Colorado visiting family. But I wanted to wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day. And there I see it. Almost. Okay. All right, I see it there. Okay, so again, what I wanted, hi Loretta, hi Carol. Again, what I wanted to talk about, if you don't know me, I'm Bonnie with So Inspired by Bonnie, and I hope that you will sign up for our newsletter that you can do over at www.soinspiredbybonnie.com, and we'd love to have you join our group and find out more about our sales and our new releases, and get some tips along the way, and sometimes I send out freebies too, so you might want to do that. Okay, I think we're good to go. So as I mentioned before, I'm in Colorado right now visiting, so I'm not in my usual setting. It's, I think, a little bit darker, but this was the best I could do today. And we're going to discuss mishaps and how they happen. They happen to all of us, so don't feel bad if you've had a disaster. It happens to all of us. We're going to discuss how to kind of rectify or fix a boo-boo, or at least use it in some fashion. And we're going to discuss test sews and how to use those up creatively so that nobody really knows that they were just a test sew when you did them. Okay, so let's say, generally speaking, when a mishap happens, it's something that you've never done before. That's not always the case, but that can happen. Say you having a little computer issue, so if I'm looking down, I apologize, but I'm trying to make sure that I can see you, and so far I've opened up 3 different pages and I keep losing them. All right, there we go. Okay, so say you were embroidering on a sweatshirt and you've never done that before, and you accidentally did the design sideways. I've done that. Or maybe it was upside down completely. I've done that. Or worst case scenario, you accidentally got a sleeve underneath, or some of the other section of the sweatshirt caught under the hoop. Didn't realize it until you couldn't release your hoop. Guilty. So we've all been there. What do? Do you throw out the t-shirt? No. You can salvage it some way, and you can make a use out of it some way. What I've done in the past, if it was simply something stitched upside down or sideways, you could go in there and rip it all out. I'm not that patient. So what I have done in the past is I create a patch of some sort. I might embroider the design on a completely different kind of complementary color fabric, or something a little bit stiffer maybe, if it were a sweatshirt, so it kind of looks like it was intentional, that it was a patch. And and then I will cut a circle around it, maybe satin stitch it on the sweatshirt, completely covering up my mishap. Good to go. Another idea you could do that I just now thought of that I think might be a cute idea is if you were to make a pocket and completely cover it. You can stitch down the top part of the pocket or stitch down where the top stitching might be on the pocket. No one would be the wiser. You're not going to use that pocket on your chest anyway. It's just there for looks. So think about creative ways that you could come up with to camouflage the mishap. What if you accidentally cut a hole? Again, you could do a patch of some sort, or if it's totally messed up where you're like, I don't want to rip this all out, I don't want to create another patch. Don't throw that sweatshirt away, because there might come a time, hopefully there'll come a time, when you want to do more sweatshirts. That's great fabric to test on. So save it to use it and say, okay, I messed up on that sweatshirt. I give myself permission to just get over that and say, I'm just going to use that as my test sew fabric for when I need to do something on sweatshirts. So, and you might need to test different types of stabilizer, or maybe you've never used that digitizer before. It's always wise, I think. If you've never used a digitizer before, test sew the project first before you go and put it on your project. When I've done baby blankets on fleece or really loose weaves, sometimes, even if I didn't have a mishap, in fact, most often I don't on those, because a lot of times on baby blankets or something that I'm not real sure of, or it's got kind of an open weave where you know it's not going to stabilize very well or easily, I might create myself a patch. And I think it works really well for two reasons, especially with babies. Is the back side of blankets, if you embroider straight on the blanket, you're going to get the scratchies on the back side unless you cover it with something like cloud cover up, or a soft fusible on the back to cover those scratchy knots that occur. But a lot of times what I like to do is, especially like I said in the beginning, when I'm creating a fleece blanket that's nice and soft and squishy, I'll get a complimentary fleece scrap and sew it out on that first, where if I mess up, it's only like a little square. I don't feel guilty about getting rid of that. And then I might cut it out in a heart shape or a flower shape or whatever, and do a little blanket stitch to attach that smaller piece that I embroidered onto the blanket. Now, if you do that, you'll want to use kind of an open zigzag or a open blanket stitch, kind of a loose, longer stitch for your bulkier, knitty, stretchy kind of blanket fabrics. So if you're not quite sure, get some test fabric that is very, very similar to your project to try out first on, so that you can test not only the digitizer, but you can test the stabilizers you use and the technique. Get that down first before you go to your good project. Okay, now let's say you have all these test sews that you haven't used on a project. It's probably safe to say that I have a lot more test sews than the average embroiderer out there, since I'm a designer and I have to test sew things prior to selling the designs, because I want them to sew out well for you. They might go through 3, sometimes even 4 test sews, but generally I try to at least do 1 or 2 test sews. No, I definitely do 1, but sometimes it's 2 or 3, just to make sure I have everything sewing properly. And that creates a lot of test sews to use up. And a lot of times it's not that the test sew looked bad. Maybe it came out really well. Maybe it has a small enough error that nobody's going to notice it. So I hate to throw those away. When I do test sews, I like to do test sews if I'm embroidering something but I know I have a project in mind, I like to test sew on a very similar project to, or excuse me, similar fabric to what my project is, so that I know going in what the end result will be. If I'm just test sewing, generally speaking, it's on a nice quilter's cotton of some sort, and I don't use cheap fabric. I don't use, that's just not me. I'm not going to sew on something that I don't think you would sew on. I want to know that it's going to turn out nice on a good quality cotton. So that in mind, I will have packages and packages of my test sews stitched out, and then I put them in these Ziploc bags, these gallon bags, so that I set them aside for a project one day, because I'm not going to throw them away. And like I said, I want to sew them on good quality fabric. I don't want to just put all that time and energy and thread into something that's cheap fabric that I'm never going to use. So, for example, on these angels that I did, here's an example. You can see that's a test sew. It hasn't been ironed or anything, and it's on a nice, you know, kind of sparkly fabric. My intentions are to do, have you seen those bed runners that go on the foot of the bed? I think these would be really pretty for Christmas time as a bed runner. So when this grows up one day, that's what I hope it to be. My idea might change between now and then, but that's what I have this pegged for at that point. So again, I put them on good fabric. You've seen this probably a few times, my little snow buddies. Again, I'll put them in a separate Ziploc bag all together, and then I'll store them in my drawers in my studio. And this is from our Snow Buddy set. Again, I did a nice quality cotton. It's on black because I wanted the Snow Buddies to pop and show. I don't do them on white because, you know, I think it might dye on white. I'm not sure. There's a lot of color in them, so it might be fine. But I just decided to put them on black because I wanted to show. I think that this is going to be a tree skirt one day when it grows up. But I put all the little test sews together, I put them in a bag, and I store them until I'm ready. Another thing I do is, since I do a lot of test sews and I do plan on using them one day, I cut my fabric to be a good couple of inches bigger than my hoop. It makes it easier to hoop, and then I have enough fabric that I can cut it down to size when I have a project idea in mind, so that I'm not sitting there going, oh, I don't have enough fabric to do what I want to do. But there's a way around that too. You can always add sashing or what have you. I just wanted to make a point that I don't use a minimal amount of fabric. I use a little bit extra so that I can cut down when I want to do a project. Now, here you've probably seen this little guy. This is a tote bag. The pattern is from Sew Michelle. And what I did was, she just had a straight panel of fabric for her tote bag. And then what I did is I had a test sew of my Sea Buddies. So I pulled out that bag and I found one that I thought would be cute with the fabric, and I created a patch. I just kind of took that patch idea a little bit farther, and I cut out this fabric the full size that I was going to do, and I put this on top. Actually, I go back a little bit. I did a little bit of echo quilting on just the test sew. I put a little bit of batting behind it. I did some echo quilting around it. I cut it down to size to fit on my panel, and then I centered it. And since I had raw edges, I just covered those raw edges with some bias trim to complement. And no one would ever know that this little guy started out as a test sew that I had, you know, quite a while before I actually had the tote pattern. So that's one way that you can kind of creatively use your test sews into projects for later use. Same thing with this little guy. I'm sure some of you have seen this one from our Spooky Buddies. I did the same thing, cut a panel, but instead of using bias trim, I did the same thing with the echo quilting around him with just a real thin batting because she has more batting underneath. And then I just use rickrack. So if you didn't want to make custom binding or sashing, I should say, you can just use some trims that you have around your studio. And that's what I did here. So it's a totally different pattern, but I kind of did the same thing, where you can see it would have been just fabric, but I went ahead and added a little test sew in there for the tote bag. A lot of you have already seen this on the website, but this is, and I don't think I can get him all in there, the Jungle Buddies quilt. This is just a section of it. And what I did with this one, these were all test sews. What I did with this one, let me kind of unfold it a little bit so you can see one. You can see they're little, what I call whoppy jawed. They're at an angle and they kind of go back and forth. What I did was I cut out my squares straight, and I did 3-inch bindings all the way around with different colors. And then I took a square ruler and I put it at an angle, and I made sure that I knew, you know, I got an angle that I kind of liked, and then I put a line on my ruler so that I would get the same angle or a mirror of that. And then I just rotated my square ruler, that's the word, my square ruler, I, you know, angled it the same using those marks that I had kind of put on. You can put marks on your rulers with tape, or, you know, tape works really well, or just mentally kind of know which angle you used to get those all the same. But those were all just test sews that turned out nice enough that, you know, I wanted to use them in a project, and they weren't so bad that I had to throw them away. I really don't have to throw away very many test sews. Even though there might have been a little boo-boo, it's generally something that doesn't really show up. And if it is something that's like, oh my goodness, that's just not right at all, you've only wasted a little square fabric. It's not a big deal. So use those test sews. Do test sew, especially, like I said, if you've never used the digitizer or if you're using fabric you're not used to. Here's another idea with test sews. Now on these I intentionally cut the test sew, and I did the test sews on yellow fabric so that I'm in a small area. So I'm kind of squished here. But I intentionally kind of free cut my test sews so that they were a little crooked. It was all intentional. And I'll have to admit, it was a little scary doing the first one, and I just thought, just go for it. Just do something fun and out of your comfort zone, cut it crooked, and let's see what you come up with. And I just took a panel, I mean, this quilt is just a jelly roll that I did strips with, and then I went about a third of the way in and created a wide white panel, just the full length of the quilt. And I do have this on my website under the projects. There's several pages of projects, but it's under the Feathered Friends project, so you could see it there. And then over the raw edges, I created some bias trim in a complementary solid fabric, and I just kind of made it like a lattice work, so that, I wish you could see the full length of this. They just kind of go down that white panel, and I just put it on top. I didn't cut out behind. I just laid it on top and made my bias pieces, let me move over, so that they would go kind of cattywampus all over the place. So it looked kind of like a lattice work going down the panel. And that was a lot of fun because I really wasn't quite sure how it was going to look until it was done. It was one of those just create as you go moments, and I have a lot of fun with that. I'm not real good at following patterns, I don't think. I like to just go in there and start cutting and going. Here's another one that was kind of along that line, but I made a few straight white panels. And then on these test sews, I actually used my Silhouette Cameo and created a frame, okay? And what I did then is I had, you know, the white fabric was much bigger than my frame, so I when you're doing, when you're cutting fabric on your silhouette cameo, you'll want to back that with, on this one I did Heat and Bond Light is what I fused to the back of a big square of fabric. Put it through my cameo to cut out these frames, and then I laid the frame on top of my test sew, and then I used a Frixion pin to kind of mark the inner excuse me, square of the frame. And then I went ahead and trimmed about 1/4 of an inch bigger than what the frame was, so that I had so that my white was cut down and would be concealed by the frame. And I fused that frame onto the white fabric on a Teflon sheet, and so that it stuck to the white. And then I took this patch, carried it over to the quilt, and stuck them randomly and fused them down onto the quilt. And then I'll show you if you can see it a little bit closer. I did a little blanket stitch around the edge. So that's one method. You could do that all by hand. You don't have to have a silhouette cameo to create a frame and cut it out. But that was something I did because I have several of these on the quilt with several frames that are all the same size, just going up and down the quilt. And this is from our Enchanted Flowers set. So that was another set of test sews. Here's something from our Exquisite Jewels, and I used the glitter flex with this, and basically it's the same principle. I took and created a little flower design in my Silhouette Cameo software, just using a circle and then adding scallops, and then I cut those out. And my white test sew pieces were much bigger than the flower, so I laid the flower until I got it in position where I wanted, traced around it with a Frixion pin, trimmed around the white fabric so that it was bigger, or not bigger, but so it was inside the area, and basically did the same thing on this one. Now on areas that, like this is a white on a really dark, what you could do is after that's fused on, all you're fusing is just this like 3/4 of an inch around the flower. You know, the green part is the only part that has any fuse on it, any of the Heat and Bond Light, because that's what I used when I cut it on the Silhouette Cameo. This test sew didn't have any fusible on it. I suppose you could add it after the fact, but I didn't. I just wanted a little bit of fusible on my quilt. I didn't want the whole thing really stiff. So this white was on top of the purple. What you can do then is after you've got this fused and stitched, you can go back in and trim. I would do the outside first, and then I would go in and trim just the back side of the quilt from behind. And that way you're not getting any of the purple to shadow through on your white. So, you know, there's different methods that you can do, but I don't think anybody would really know that this wasn't intentional, that this wasn't my plan in the beginning when I first embroidered these designs. Nothing could be further from the truth. They were just test sews in a bag, but it saves you a lot of time in the end when you have a project in mind. All your embroidery is already done, so all you have to do is go incorporate it in some fashion into your project, because as you know, embroidery can take a long time to just sew it all out. You know, a lot of designs can take a half hour, an hour, and you times that by, you know, several designs, you have many hours just in embroidery. So that's a pretty good time saver if you can use your test sews and create them into projects, because you're not having to do them on right there at the same time. You've already got some set aside and ready to go. I have a friend of mine, Julie, that one year, and I don't have it with me because I thought of it on the drive up here. I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I need to tell everybody. Julie took her test sews one year, and she cut them with her pinking shears into squares. You could do circles, whatever shape you want. And then she went to Hobby Lobby. There we are mentioning Hobby Lobby again, but anywhere where they sell just the blank gift bags with no pictures on them whatsoever. She took and got just the plain brown gift bags. And she took some test sews and she cut, like I said, with her pinking shears. You could use a rotary wave cutter if you want, or you could use rickrack trim, or trim that, you know, little scraps of trim that you have around your studio, because it doesn't take much. And she would decorate up the test sews. She would glue them onto the gift bag, and they made the cutest Christmas gift bags or whatever. And she'd put little bows on them, or maybe buttons in the corner, and they were just darling. Something that they were totally original, and you couldn't go out and buy them. So that's another idea. Think of different ways to use up your test sews. Again, it's really good to do a test sew if you've never used that type of fabric, or you've never used that designer, so that you're sure before you go to your real project you have a game plan and you know it's going to work. And if it doesn't work during your test sew, again, you've only lost just a little piece of fabric. So I hope that gives you some inspiration to go out there and try new things, and not be afraid if a mishap happens, that there's some way to use it, whether you can put a patch over it, or whether you can just chalk it up to experience and save that fabric to use for other test sews. Make it work for you and have a purpose. So I'm going to check now and see if anybody has any questions. Excuse me for looking down and you seeing the top of my head, but see if we have any questions here. Dina said she loves the ideas and the quilts are beautiful. Thank you. I wish I could unfurl them bigger so that you could kind of see the whole thing, but I know they're on the website, so if you look in the projects there, you'll kind of see some close-ups and some better pictures. But thank you. Teresa said, I would love to see a video on how to angle your blocks. Well, maybe we can do that. I was thinking of that this morning. I thought, you know, it would be nice to be able to show you exactly what I did so that we could, you know, kind of angle the blocks, because I didn't have a pattern for that. I just took my test sews. Like I said, I made things a little bit extra big on the sashing, and then I angled my ruler. But maybe we can do that soon. I think that's a great idea. Let's see if there's any others. I'm not seeing any others, but that doesn't always mean there aren't some others, because sometimes my computer doesn't, you know, keep going down to show me the other questions. Oh, Carol says me too. So there's a couple of you that want to, I think, see the Jungle Buddies quilt where I did the angled squares. I thought it was kind of easy. I try not to do things that are hard. Like unsewing. I don't like ripping things out. Well, let's see. I'm looking at my phone now because I can't see on my computer. Oh, here, my computer's back. It's a bigger picture so I can see that. Oh, you're welcome, Angie. Angie said thank you for the tips. Teresa was saying that she'd like to see how we do the angled blocks. Okay, all right, I'll do it. You guys want to see how I do it? When I get back in Texas and I'm in my studio, we'll do one on how I did the Jungle Buddies quilt, so you actually can see that. It's not hard. It's not. I think that's it. But if oh wait, Becky's saying something. If I had problems with the fricks, oh. Becky's asking, have you had any problems with the Frixion pins showing up after your quilt is done? I have not, but I have heard either I think it was the red or the purple. I'm not positive. Dee from Australia was telling me that she had trouble with one of the colors. So if you're not sure, what I would do is I would take some of my scraps from my quilt fabric, mark it up real good, just just abuse it, and then iron it and see if you have any problems with it coming out or reappearing. You know, let it sit for a couple of days, and if you do, use something else. Use a chalk pen, or not, yeah, a chalk pen or something, you know, a water soluble pen. That would be fine. Anything that you feel comfortable with that you know is going to work and not mess up your end project. That's what I would do. So maybe, I don't know if there's different dyes or something out there with the Frixion pens, but I've heard a couple of people saying that they've reappeared. I know that, you know, you touch it up with an iron and it doesn't take much. It'll go away again. So, you know, if it does reappear on you, that's what I would do. Personally, I haven't noticed it on these quilts at all, where any of it's reappeared, but not saying it couldn't happen. So, like I said, an air-soluble marker works, or a water-soluble will work really well too. Okay, Nancy is asking, where in Texas do I live? Do you do classes other than the video? I used to do classes years ago. Gosh, it's been a long time. Probably 8-10 years ago when I did classes for a dealership there in town. I'm in the Dallas area, little town called Flower Mound. But I used to do classes for a long, long time, but I don't do classes anymore. I just have the live videos right now because I missed doing classes, and I missed connecting with everybody and sharing ideas and learning from everybody, you know, each other, because I feel like I'm still learning. I feel like I have some things, some ideas that maybe somebody else can learn from, and sometimes they learn from my boo-boos, because I'm one of those that think even if I've made a mistake, I can learn something from that. So it's not the end of the world. You know, we all have mishaps, we all have boo-boos. So anyway, I got onto the farm to market road again. I do that a lot. Oh, Dina, I think that's right. Dina said that she's always learning. Well, good. I'm right there with you, Dina. And just when I think I've got it down, they come out with some neat new product that I have to try, or a neat new notion that I want to try. So it keeps our craft fun, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to double check the questions to make sure I didn't miss anything in the feed. And if I did miss any questions, I will definitely get back in there and answer those questions. So if you think of a question later on, you can always come back and ask, and I'll check and try to get you an answer. I will post this on my YouTube channel, which is also So Inspired by Bonnie, and I will post it to my Pinterest page. If you've been there, got some... all of my videos are on the Pinterest page, and of course they'll be on this Facebook. So I will repost this when I'm done. I will have the captions added when I'm completed. So I hope to see you next Tuesday, and who knows, maybe we'll go ahead and do that Whoppy Jawed Jungle Buddies quilt and show you how I did that. Okay? So until next Tuesday, hope you have a great time, and happy Valentine's Day. Take care. Bye-bye.